Hi everyone, welcome back. Today we are going to be talking about the stages of clay. This is really important for you to know when you're working with clay so you understand what you can do with it at different points and when it's best to do certain things. So starting off, the different stages, clay over time, water leaves the particles and it becomes harder. So the most liquid form is that slip that we used in some of our other videos. So it's basically fresh clay that's been watered down. It's usually a consistency that's kind of pudding-like, but it really just depends how much water you put in it. Slip is used for texture. It's used for slipping and scoring, kind of acts as a glue, but not really made for building. The one that you use for that is plastic clay. So this, when you get a chunk of clay from me fresh out of the bag, this is what you would get. And it's clay that can be manipulated, bent. If I squeeze it, it changes shape. I can kind of curve it pretty easily. And the more I do to the clay, the more moisture my hands are going to take away from it. And that will make it more and more dry. So eventually it'll start to crack, it'll start to be brittle as it's starting to approach leather hard, which is the next one. So plastic clay, it doesn't imply like plastic like you might have in a hard bottle like this. Instead it's plastic. Think about pliable. So the pores of the clay can be manipulated because there's so much water inside of it. Plastic. Next stage is what we call leather hard. So you've probably seen this before, or maybe you will in an upcoming video. It's just my example of slipping and scoring. And if you notice, this piece is staying attached to this piece, and it's not just flobbing over because it's a pliable piece of clay. Instead, it's holding its form. So leather hard clay is really good for building. Right? You can make a box out of it because you can slip and score the pieces together still, but they hold their shape. Leather hard is also really good for texture. So an example, this is a piece, part of a piece I'm working on, and you can see that once again, it's holding its shape. It's not bending and wilting, but you can see that there are these carved lines within it. And these work really well when your clay is leather hard. If I did it when the clay was too soft, then it would just make a lot of pilly parts and it would kind of not hold up as well. So leather hard, great for building, construction, holding form. The next phase is what we call bone dry. So if I hold up these two pieces, which are bone dry, next to the piece that is leather hard, you might notice that there's a little bit of a color difference. Well, bone dry means all of the moisture has left the clay. So it's very, very dry and it starts to turn more white, kind of like bones. The weird thing about bone dry clay is that it's extremely breakable, okay? There's no moisture in it anymore. So when it's leather hard, there's a lot of moisture inside of it, a lot of water. So it's still very, very strong and holds its form. But as I said, when it's bone dry, no moisture, there's nothing really holding it together anymore. Now, bone dry clay is what we need when you're putting something in the kiln. So I have a piece here that I have been working on. It is 2 hands. I don't know if I can show you much better than that. This piece has been drying out for a couple weeks. Now it is bone dry, and now it's finally ready for me to put in the kiln. If there was moisture in it, when I put it in the kiln, it would explode. So you've got to be very careful. The other tricky thing is, since it's so fragile when it's bone dry, you have to be very, very careful with how you move that piece. So whenever you're transporting pieces, you really want to transport them when they're leather hard versus when they're bone dry. All right, moving on. Next stage is called bisque wear. Okay, so bisque wear is after the clay has been fired once. So it's bone dry, goes in the kiln, and then it gets bisque fired, and I will show you the text so you see how that's spelled. Now I don't have examples here that have just been bisque fired, so I'm going to show you with a test tile. So this was one of my test tiles in my home studio that tell me what a glaze combination looks like. You can see there's glaze on it, so this is not bisque fired, except the back of it shows you what bisque fired would look like. Looks very similar to the clay that we looked at before. So if I hold up bone dry and bisque wear, you'll see they look pretty similar in color. The difference is, listen to bone dry. when I bang it on the table, listen to bisque wear. Actually, those sound almost exactly the same on this wooden table. I'll do this. Hopefully you can hear that. It sounds more like a stone. This is incredibly durable, almost impossible to break. Okay, really, really turns it almost into a stone material. After bisque wear, the final one is called glaze wear. So this is where we put colored material, we'll talk about glaze in another video, on the surface, and you fire it one more time, and that's how we get that coloration. It's also how you're able to put water in the inside of forms and have it not go through, because now it is not a porous surface anymore. The glaze seals up any pores. So those are your stages. We have slip, we have plastic, we have leather hard, bone dry, bisque, and glaze wear.